Welcome to Focus Friday. Today's video, we're looking at the 3 care file types that can put you at risk if they're not reflective of care needs that are current. In my experience, when it comes to safeguardings, complaints and negative inspections, there are 3 types of care file that are most at risk of not being updated and reviewed to reflect current needs and therefore put you at most risk. The first one is respite care files. If you think about it, when you've got a respite resident that returns to your care regularly, it's often common practice to pull the old care file out. Yes, you have a quick chat with the family member or the main carer when they're at home, and it's great, good to go. They've advised you there's no real change, everything's the same as their last visit. So the resident comes in, but the needs have changed. But they've changed gradually. So the person giving you that update hasn't seen those changes, just sees it as normal because it's happened over weeks, if not months. But the staff see the changes and they adapt, as good staff always do. So increased elimination needs are supported by regular toileting or changing of clothes. Maybe their nutrition needs have changed and they take more help to eat their meals, or they're a bit more likely to not finish their meal if they're not prompted. Perhaps they need more help with their morning hygiene needs of washing and dressing. Again, maybe they need prompting. But none of this is documented. The care is fine, but it's not documented. So the resident goes home and the main carer at home has some concerns or niggles. It could be anything. But they discuss it with a professional that is in regular contact with them. They raise a complaint or maybe a safeguarding, depending what those concerns were that were raised, and you get a visit from commissioning. And they ask to see the care file, and it's not up to date. And I've been involved in a number of examples in various different care homes where that's been an issue. But the example that does spring to mind was a gentleman that came into this particular home every 6 weeks and had done for about 2 years. And that last admission, yes, that his wife said, no, there's no real change. Everything's great. I'm going away this weekend. I'll come in and visit him on Monday. But he's obviously planned to be with you for the week. So off she goes. She comes in on Monday and she's horrified, quite rightly so, to find that he's in soiled underwear and clothing. He's got stubble on his chin and he's generally looking very unkempt and not how he looked when she left him on the Friday. She took him home. She raised a complaint. It resulted in commissioners coming in. They looked at the care file. It absolutely had not been updated. There was nothing to suggest in the care file that this individual needed help to get up in the morning, help to change his clothes, prompting to eat his meals. None of it was documented. So they then went to look at other care files and other care files, and the end result of one respite care file that didn't reflect the current needs was that they ended up in embargo. So I cannot emphasize the importance of always making sure that anybody that comes in, however long they've been a respite admission into your care home, that you check that the care file is up to date, that you or your staff member have that detailed conversation when they are admitted and go through as if it was a pre-admission assessment, just to make sure that what you've got documented in relation to their care needs reflects their current care needs. The second one is newish residents. I specifically say newish because when somebody first comes into the care home and they're first admitted, it's accepted and understood that you do a pre-admission assessment as you would, and that you create and formulate basic care plans and risk assessments based on that pre-admission assessment, with the expectation that that information will change when they've been with you for 4 to 6 weeks, because by the nature of it, you will have more knowledge of their needs. Perhaps their needs may have changed as they've settled into the care home. Maybe their behaviours have changed. and actually changes can be, you know, improved changes as well as deterioration. Maybe they're eating better, maybe they've put weight on, maybe it is the opposite and they're not eating as well, or they've withdrawn from themselves. And the problem is when that increased detailed knowledge of their care needs is not reflected in the care plans, in the risk assessments and the care plans, and is not person-centred as you would expect it to be once somebody has been living in a care home for that 4 to 6 weeks. So newish resident care files, I always think, are more risky of not being updated to reflect current needs than your new resident who has literally been with you a week or a fortnight. And the final care file type that I think is most likely to be at risk of not updating is the one where the resident has returned from hospital, particularly when that resident has lived with you for a long time. So staff and your staff team are familiar with their needs. And similar to the respite main carer example I've given you, the changes have been gradual over a long period. So staff perhaps don't actually realise that deterioration unless they actively sit and reassess it. And the danger is that those changes, although they're being cared for in a different way, are not reflected in the documentation. And that's particularly relevant if somebody or a resident has had an admission to hospital and that post-discharge, the care file hasn't been altered or updated to reflect the reason for the hospital admission, or the rationale for the needs to change the care delivery that you're giving that individual. And there's loads of examples, obviously, I could use, but common ones are perhaps that they've gone into hospital, they've maybe had a longer stay than planned, and they've come out and they've lost weight, or they're not as mobile as they were, or their elimination, their continence levels have changed and they need more support for elimination, and that isn't reflected in updated care planning. So as a manager, none of us can check all of the things all of the time, and certainly not with care files when you have 50, 60, perhaps more residents in your care home. But my strong advice is that you get into a process of checking your 3 most risky care file types. The respite care file, to make sure it's reflective of that current admission. Your newish resident, block it in your diary from admission to 6 weeks down the line to make a point of going and checking that the care file has been updated and reflects the improved knowledge for that individual, or perhaps their changing needs since they came to you. And thirdly, always check the care files for those residents that have been in hospital and have returned to you. Whether that was a short hospital admission or a long one, it still needs to be updated and documented, the reason for the admission and potentially any change in care needs. Hopefully that's been helpful, and hopefully you won't be in a position where your home is at risk if you have not got those specific care files updated. Thanks for listening. If this has been helpful, please subscribe to our Focus Friday. There'll be a new one every week with tips on how you can manage your home well. Thank you for listening.